Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 9:45 a.m., Wednesday, May the 12th, and this is your last new lesson for 2021. Okay? Hopefully you guys are cheering on the other end, at least those that are watching us. So anyway, let's take a look at Unit 7, Day 3. So we're going to, it's basically just a little more practice from Day 2. Hence the name Practice with Trig Values. All right? Now on the instructions, it says try to find the exact value without looking. Okay? So try to challenge yourself in the sense that you want to try to remember those trig values from that first quadrant. And once you sort of internalize those values in that first quadrant, then you can sort of map out the rest of the unit circle. That's how I sort of piece these things together. I don't run around thinking the sine of 330 in my head. I think about, okay, what is the reference angle for 330? And then I start there, okay? So in the first one, it just says sine of 45. Now, what's nice about the sine of 45 and the, there we go, and the cosine of 45 degrees is the same. Square root 2 over 2, okay? This point on the unit circle, this angle measure, that is the point where that angle falls on the circle. Okay? Those are your x and y values. Okay? And remember, it always goes cosine is your x, sine is your y. So if you want to think about it like this, what comes first in the alphabet? And so you start with your cosine first. Okay? And again, these values here, okay, stem from the origin to the, outside of the circle, or your point on the unit circle. Okay, so that represents the x and y value for the degree measure, 45 degrees. Okay? Now, the next one's cosine of 120. Right? So this one falls in the second quadrant. Right? So we have to think about, all right, because it's in the second quadrant, okay, what is our reference angle? So in order to find this, because we're in the second quadrant, I'm going to subtract 180 by 120, and I get 60. Okay? So that tells me the reference angle for 120 degrees is 60 degrees. Okay? And then I think about, all right, what is the cosine of 60 degrees? And that's 1/2. Now, here's where our little all students talk constantly. All students talk constantly comes into play here, right? This represents when both the sine and the cosine is positive. This represents when the sine value is positive. Down here, our tangent value is positive, so that means both our sine and cosine are negative, which makes sense being in the third quadrant. And then this is our positive negative here, meaning our cosine is positive. Okay, and this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Okay, so because we're 120 degrees, we're just past 90. Right, so there's 90 degrees, there's 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and back around 360. Okay, so because we're in the second quadrant, our sine value is positive, which means our cosine is negative. Going to the next one. Okay, so the tangent of 210. So we are in the third quadrant. Excuse me. And so our closest horizontal axes. Whoops, let me get a different color there so I can circle it better here. No, I don't want that one. Here we go. Yeah, our closest horizontal axes is 180 again. So I'm going to go 210 minus 180, which will give me 30. So my reference angle for the tangent of 210 is 30 degrees. And then we have to think, okay, what is the tangent of 30 degrees? Well, that's square root of 3 over 3. And then because we are in the third quadrant, our tangent value is positive. Moving down to the sine of 330. All right. We're in the fourth quadrant now. which means our closest horizontal axis is 360. So subtract that, and again, my reference angle, like I was talking in the beginning of the value, is 30 degrees. All right, so what is the sine value of 30 degrees? Well, that's 1/2. Okay, and because we are in the fourth quadrant, that means our cosine is positive and our sine is negative. So there's our answer. So as you can see, the sine of 330 degrees is the same as the cosine of 120. All right, cosine of 180. Remember, this is one of our quadrantals, right? Which means when we are talking about quadrantals, let me write our unit circle here again. Let's see if I can map all these points. Oof, that was bad. Gotta be quicker. There we go. Not too shabby. All right, so there's our unit circle, okay, which means this point here, I wrote kind of small. Let me move this over. Yeah, I'm taking my time here. I'm just excited. This is my last video. There we go. So, this is 1, 0. This is 0, 1. Negative 1, 0. 0, negative 1. All right, so, because we're at 180 degrees, means we're over here. Our cosine value, or our x value, is negative 1. And then the tangent of 270 degrees, down here, remember tangent of theta could also be represented as sine of theta or the cosine of theta, which in this case would be negative 1 over 0, which means this guy is undefined. So if you were to type into the tangent of 270 degrees into your calculator, you would get an error. Okay, let's continue on here. All right, so for the next lesson here, right, we're talking about find all the possible angles that have this exact value here. Okay, so first we have to think about what angle measure is associated with this guy right here. That's 45 degrees. Okay, so when we're in the first quadrant, we get a positive square root 2 over 2. And then we have to think about, okay, where else is our sine value positive? That would be the second quadrant. Okay, so the reference angle in the second quadrant for 145 degrees, or for, I'm sorry, 45 degrees, come on, pen's dying, is 135 degrees. Okay, the next one. All right, we have to think about when we have a cosine of 1/2. Right, well, our reference angle for that is 60 degrees. Okay, however, 60 degrees in the first quadrant, you know, our cosine value is positive. So you have to think about what reference angle, okay, as we go around this unit circle to 60 degrees, do we have a cosine of negative 1/2? Right, so we're going to be in the second and third quadrant, okay, and the reference angle for 60 degrees in the second quadrant is 120, and the reference angle for 60 degrees in the third quadrant is 240. Okay, number 9. All right, so we have to think about when we have a tangent value of square root 3 over 3. Okay, don't look too hard. Look up to number 3 there. That's 30 degrees. So we're referencing 30 degrees here. And so when is our tangent value negative? Well, that's in the second and fourth quadrant. Okay, so what's the reference angle associated with 30 degrees in the second quadrant? Well, that's 150. And then in the fourth quadrant, it is 330. Okay, when we have a sine value of negative 1, well, it's already circled on your screen there. Okay, that is at 270 degrees. When do we have a positive cosine value of a square root 3 over 2? Well, that's first going to be in the first quadrant, which is 30 degrees. And then also, when we have a positive cosine value, it would be in the fourth quadrant. And so the reference angle for that, well, for 30 degrees would also, or so the other angle would be 330. All right, so the reference angle for 330 is 30 degrees. So we just had to think, where was our cosine value also positive? And that's in the fourth quadrant. Okay, when is the tangent value undefined? So basically, when we look up to number 6, we saw that the tangent of 270 is undefined. So there's 1. And the only other place where you get a sine value of 1 and a cosine value of 0, where you get a 1 over 0 ratio, which you cannot divide by 0. So only two places. That's 270 and 90 degrees. And these are all degrees here. Okay, so the last piece. Determine in which quadrant the following characteristics could be found. Okay, so before I get started, I want to remind you of these pieces right here. Cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over the sine of theta. Secant of theta is equal to 1 over the cosine of theta. And then remember, cotangent of theta is equal to 1 over the tangent of theta. Right? So you'll see those pieces appear in your homework. We're not going to get into much depth with those guys, so you'll learn more about those when you get to pre-calc and calculus. But for now, just recognize that these are the co-functions, and if you plan on taking math, these guys aren't going anywhere. You will see them when you do well, trig identities, guarantee it. So anyway, in this piece right here, we're looking for when our sine value is positive. That's what that means, is above 0, and our cosine value is below 0, meaning it is negative. Okay, so we got to think, when is our sine value positive and our cosine value is negative? That's the second quadrant. Okay, we have to think about number 14, when our tangent is positive. Okay, so that can be either the first quadrant or the third quadrant. But then we also need our cosecant value or our sine value positive. So where is our tangent value positive? And our we're looking at the sine value positive. There's only one place, and it can't be the third quadrant, because remember, in the third quadrant our tangent values are positive, but our sine and cosine are negative. So therefore this has to be, if my pen gets working here, in the first quadrant. And then finally, what in the world? I'm running out of ink. This is tangent of theta. So we're looking for when our tangent is positive, when our cosine value is negative. And so that can't be the first quadrant, because everything's positive in that one. So it's got to be the third. Okay? Now, you guys will have a mock quest coming up on this stuff. Right? And it's pretty much going to sort of mimic everything you see here. Okay, so your next unit quest will be pretty much what you're looking at here. Same type of problems, okay, and determining which quadrants things are in, and sort of getting you guys to memorize your trig values, at least starting from the first quadrant, and then you can sort of branch out the rest of the unit circle. Okay, so good luck if you're watching this. Hopefully this made sense. If nobody watches it, well, then it's a big bummer. Anyway, have a good